something strange is happening to the middle. It isn't simply shrinking, it is being pulled apart. Wealth is dividing into people whose assets, capital, and technology compound for them, and people still trying to survive preliminarily by wages. Work is dividing into people amplified by technology and people replaced, monitored, or managed by it. Businesses are dividing into dominant platforms and everyone renting access to their customers. Even attention is dividing into people seen by millions and people who can barely prove they exist. Economists once called this a K-shaped recovery, but I don't think we're looking at a K-shaped recovery anymore. We're looking at a new operating system. You probably remember the term K-shaped recovery from the pandemic. The idea was simple. After same crisis, one group recovered upward, while another continued failing. The same country, same economy. Completely different realities. But what if the K-shape never went away? What if it spread? What if housing, jobs, businesses, technology, cities, culture, and even social belonging are being recognized by that same shape? One branch rising, one branch falling, and less space to live in between. Because the middle was never merely an income bracket. The middle was the shock absorber. It was where people could be reasonably well, okay, but not rich. Where a normal job could support a normal life. Where someone could start near the bottom, gain experience, and move, a little bit upward. Where a small business could succeed without becoming a national empire. Where a product could be well made without becoming a luxury item. Where you could have an opinion without turning it into an identity. Where you could make something worthwhile without becoming famous. The middle gave ordinary people somewhere to stand and somewhere to go, and both are becoming unstable. You can see it in housing, but even that division is more complicated than homeowners versus renters. Yes, some homeowners are protected by low mortgage rates and rising property values, but protection is not the same prosperity. A 3% mortgage may keep a household from falling faster, while insurance, taxes, repairs, food, utilities, and debt consume everything else that they earn. Their house may be worth more on paper, but unless they sell, borrow against it, or somehow convert that equity into income, it does not necessarily make their daily life any better. And many cannot sell because buying the next house could cost dramatically more. So they own appreciating asset, but remain completely desperate on wages and survive. That is not necessarily the top branch of the K. No. It may simply be the old middle class trying to not slide down to the exact bottom. The deeper division is between people whose assets, capital, and technology generate increasingly leverage, and people who must keep selling their time just to maintain their position. Some people own the systems producing the gains. Others may own a house, retirement account, or a small business, but remain one job loss, medical problem, or major expense away from discovering how fragile that ownership really is. They're not necessarily moving upward. They may simply be falling more slowly. Now, look at work. At the top, technology can make highly skilled, highly connected, and highly leveraged people astonishingly productive. One person with capital, expertise, software, artificial intelligence may accomplish, what's required for that department. That person becomes more valuable, maybe. But further down, the same technology can divide jobs into smaller tasks, measurable, a little bit, reduce bargaining power, and make workers easier to replace. one worker is amplified, another is automated, and between them, the traditional career ladder starts losing rungs. And that may be the most dangerous part. And the problem is not only the certain jobs disappear, the jobs have always changed. Yeah, the problem is losing the pathway between the bottom and the top. The assistant who becomes the coordinator who became the manager who learned the operation and eventually opened a business, let's say. Those were not merely jobs, they were bridges. But if artificial intelligence absorbs the beginner tasks, automation removes the intermediate positions, and companies hire only people who already have experience and connections, where does this go? We may become incredibly efficient at eliminating beginner and mediator. Surprised? We shouldn't be. That is what job polarization really means. More opportunity near the top, more necessity down the bottom, less security between them. A smaller group designs the system. A larger group services it, feeds it, delivers it, cleans it, and waits for instructions from it. And the people who once occupied the middle are told to become more exceptional, just to remain ordinary. That is the K again. Now look at businesses. The internet was supposed to allow anyone to compete. And in one sense, it did. A person with a phone can reach customers around the world. But reaching those customers increasingly means passing through somebody else's platform. The marketplace, the app store, the search engine, the social network, the delivery service, the payment processor, the booking site. The small business may technically be owned by a company while renting access to almost every part of the customer relationship. Meanwhile, the platform sees transactions. It sees what sells. It controls discovery. It can change the fee. It can change the algorithm. It can suspend the account. And sometimes it can introduce a whole new product. So the small business receives access, and the platform accumulates leverage. The largest companies become infrastructure. Everyone else becomes a tenant, and the middle-sized company gets trapped. Too large to operate like one person with almost no overhead. Too small to control distribution, absorb losses, or negotiate with the gatekeepers. Dominant or dependent. Scale or struggle. Another K. The same thing is happening to products. Look at what survives. Luxury at the top, discount at the bottom, and in the middle, trouble. The wealthy customer can absorb the premium. The financially stressed customer is forced toward the cheapest available option. But the customer who wants something well-made, reasonably priced, and built to last, that product is becoming strangely difficult to produce profitably. So, quality moves upward, affordability moves downward, and the middle fills with subscriptions, financing plans, smaller packages, downgraded materials, and things designed to look premium until you actually use them. We haven't eliminated choice. We've created hundreds of versions of the same two choices. Pay more than feels reasonable, or accept less than you wanted. Even our cities are becoming K-shaped. One neighborhood attracts money, development, businesses, and attention. That investment makes it more desirable. And desirability attracts more investment. Prices rise. Another neighborhood loses businesses and services. Daily life becomes harder. People with options leave. The tax base weakens. Investment becomes even less attractive. One place enters an upward feedback loop, the other enters a downward one. And this is the hidden machinery of the K. Advantage attracts more advantage. Disadvantage makes recovery more expensive. The system doesn't merely record who is ahead, it helps determine who can accelerate. And then there is attention. This may be the strangest K of all. We have more ways to speak publicly than population in history ever has, but visibility is becoming radically concentrated. A tiny number of people, stories, and controversies can dominate millions of screens, while thoughtful work from everyone else effectively disappears. The middle-sized creator is squeezed too. Too large to remain purely personal, too small to receive the staff, distribution, and protection of major media operation. And because algorithm remains this way, it's performing. Attention produces more attention. Visibility becomes evidence of something that deserves, visibility. Popularity becomes more popular. Winner or invisible. This doesn't just change media, it changes us. People learn that measured, complicated opinions rarely travel as far as absolute ones, so the middle of the argument begins disappearing too. Not necessarily because nobody believes moderate things, but because moderation performs poorly inside systems that reward emotional intensity. The loudest position receives the reaction creates distribution. The distribution attracts more extreme response. And eventually, everyone looking through a screen becomes convinced that the entire world has lost its mind. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe the middle is still there, but the machinery has made nearly invisible. Now, there is an important counter argument. Not everyone leaving the middle moves downward. Some people move upward. Technology does create new opportunities. New companies do break through. People do build wealth. This is not a story in which everyone is becoming poor. It is a story in which outcomes are spreading farther apart, and the mechanisms for catching up are weakening. More extraordinary success, more profound insecurity, less ordinary stability between them, and that may be even more destabilizing, because societies do not only need prosperity, they need enough shared experience for people to understand one another. A person whose investments, career, and business rise with technological change and look economy and honestly say, this is working. Another person whose rent, insurance, and food costs rise while the job becomes less secure can look at the same economy and honestly say, this is collapsing. In the old middle class, somehow, property value may have risen, while the cost of maintaining their actual life rises even faster. They may look successful in the data and feel increasingly terrified in reality. These people are not necessarily disagreeing about the facts. They are living on a different branch of the K. That is why so many of our arguments feel impossible to resolve. One side points upward and proof of success. The other points downward as proof of failure. Both have evidence. The economy can grow while people become, less secure. Technology can create opportunity while eliminating pathways. Asset values can rise while many of the people who technically own these assets still cannot afford their daily lives. Businesses can reach the entire world while becoming more dependent on a handful of gatekeepers. We keep asking which story is true. The K-shaped model says both. If you like looking beneath the public argument to see the architecture creating it, like this video and subscribe to Signal Shift. because everyone is arguing about which branch deserves the blame. I'm interested in why the branches keep separating. And here is where it becomes even bigger than economics. When the middle disappears, compromise starts looking like surrender. Moderate products vanish. Middle-sized businesses vanish. Ordinary neighborhoods vanish. Career ladders lose their middle rungs. Moderate opinions vanish from view. People stop feeling as though they are participating in the same system. The winners become increasingly insulated from the consequences experienced below them. The people falling behind become increasingly suspicious of the institutions celebrating progress above them. Trust fractures because reality fractures, and eventually a country can remain geographically united while psychologically living in separate economies. So, what is causing the decay? Not one villain, not one political party, not one technology. It is a collection of feedback loops. Assets rise faster than wages. Scale lowers costs and attracts more customers. Platforms reward what already has attention. Data improves the systems that already possess the most data. Technology magnifies people who already have capital and expertise. Scarcity protects the position of people who already own what others need. Each advantage becomes fuel for the next advantage. Each disadvantage becomes another toll charged on the attempt to escape it. The people and institutions with leverage receive more leverage. Those beginning without it merely remain behind. It becomes more expensive for them to catch up. That is not a temporary recovery pattern. That is an operating system. And perhaps that is why everything feels more extreme. Why the economy can appear strong while ordinary people feel unstable. Why technology feels liberating and threatening at the same time. Why some businesses become more powerful than nations, while others cannot survive one slow month. Why we appear to surround ourselves with luxury and desperation and less ordinary life between them. The middle was the part of society that absorbed pressure. It gave people mobility, stability, patience, a pathway upward, a reason to believe tomorrow could be better without requiring a miracle. But perhaps the most important part of this story is that the middle has not completely disappeared yet. Millions of people still look middle class. They have a house, a job, a car, maybe a retirement account. But those things may have been acquired under an older operating system, a system in which wages went farther. Career ladders had the rungs. Competition had more room. And ordinary stability did not require extraordinary performance. They may still possess the symbols of the middle, while losing the security that once made those symbols meaningful. That is the real shift. Much of the old middle class has not risen to the top of the K. It is clinging to assets acquired under the old system, while its actual standard of living moves downward. It looks stable from the outside. It feels precarious from within. And because the decline is disguised by property values, credit, and appearances, we may not recognize what is happening until the shock absorbed already gone. If the middle keeps disappearing, we will not simply be the society with rich people and more poor people. We'll become a society with fewer places where those realities ever meet. Fewer shared workplaces, fewer shared neighborhoods, fewer shared institutions, fewer shared facts, and fewer people who believe the system contains a realistic place for them. Once people no longer share that same economy, the same information, the same pathways, or even the same definition of progress? What exactly is still holding the center together? The middle isn't merely shrinking. It is being pulled apart. And the K may no longer describe where we are recovering from. It may describe where the entire system is taking us.